Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read out another chapter of Squeaky by Jess Bravin. It's called The Gun is Pointed. At the FBI's Sacramento headquarters, Lee Latham set up a command post to oversee the burgeoning investigation, an operation he had codenamed after the principals, Fromford. At 15 agents gathered around the office's largest table to go over the assignments, Latham recalled the FBI's adage attributed to J. Edgar Hoover. We not only have to be right, we have to look right. He assumed the saying actually had been crafted by one of Hoover's image-savvy assistants, but Latham intended to follow it nonetheless. At all, it was nearly 15 years after Dallas, and people were still second-guessing the JFK's investigation. Latham resolved that no clouds of mystery could ever hang over the Squeaky Fromm case, and the suggestion of one agent, lip readers, were even hired to decode the words Lynn appeared to be mouthing in film after the shot when she was arrested. Across the country, the investigation rolled forward. Federal agents visited Lynn's parents, now living in Palos Verdes. That's where my mother lived. An upscale suburb south of Redondo Beach, Helen and William Fromme told investigators that Lynn had been under psychiatric care in 1966. Good to say little about their daughter since then, perhaps another visitor to the Fromme condominium. The parish priest received more frank confessions. Neither he nor the Frommes, however, had anything to say to the public. Agents intended Lynn's brother and sister, while others found out to locate members of the Manson family. In prison and elsewhere, one agent went to Death Valley and compiled a roster of all family members, associates who had been passed through in the previous 18 months. The FBI visited Mary Bruner, Katie Sadie, and Lulu at the California Institution of Women at Fonterra. None seemed to have known in advance of Lynn's actions in Milford, New Hampshire. Queen agents fruitlessly questioned Linda Kasabian, the Tate LaBianca prosecution star witness, who now used the name Linda Christian. At San Quentin, the FBI's paid a 2-hour call on Charlie Manson. Manson was willing to discuss his philosophy, investigators said, but that was all. The interview was unproductive. An agent tersely reported superiors in Washington were advanced that allegedly members of the Manson family using drugs had participated in homosexual and perverted sexual acts. Meanwhile, reporters pressed jail guards for details of Lynn's behavior behind the bars. The suspect, they learned, had turned down the institutional menu of bologna sandwiches and instead received peanut butter and jelly, and inside of coleslaw and grape-flavored Kool-Aid. She was spending much of her time watching television, keeping when she visited the jail's rooftop exercise yard. One guard told a reporter that Lynn was in good spirits and had begun to converse casually with her host. Well, you know, the jailer quoted, Lynn was saying, when people around you treat you like a child and pay no attention to things you say, you have to do something. Lynn was an obedient prisoner, but she did not intend for her changed circumstances to detract from her work. She wrote a note to the guard explaining how she differed from the ordinary prisoners in the woman's jail. It is my job to see that the different agencies of our system are aware of what our counterparts are doing, especially in regard to the preservation of our environment. You may not realize the extent of the fact in the saying, one hand does not know what the other hand is doing. In regard to those agencies, but I have researched the matter for you yourselves and may have examples of it. You need a person like me, smiley face, to make sure that you are not severed by the thousands of pages of diversified bureaucracy that often completely rule the real issues. Jail regulations allow Lynn to send only one page of correspondence per day. She offered to give up that right in exchange for being able to send an unlimited number of postcards. In addition to her often instantaneous need to respond to news reports, Lynn said that the matter came down to common courtesy. As one of America's most notorious defendants, she was receiving piles of mail from people who deserved at least a short reply. Lynn indicated that she would be discreet with her privileges so that her fellow inmates would not come down with the Me Too syndrome. because she had been pegged to be some sort of revolutionary. Lynn figured the jail might fear her spreading unhealthy communications. Not so, she insisted. I do not have bloodlust and can see beyond the emotional rebellions that cause it. More than most, she understood the terrible consequences of anarchy. Besides, Lynn wrote, unless you can permit me to do my job, I'm going to have to get you to do it. And if you don't have the time, she requests a small desk and a chair, along with a desk lamp, typewriter, and a radio. At a minimum, she wanted a pen or a little pencil sharpener. I don't want to run the officers back and forth sharpening my pencil. Despite the thoughtful plea, jail authorities turned her down. When federal defender Dick Walker brought the matter to Judge McBride, something of a compromise was reached. Lynn was granted her pencil sharpener. At P Street, Sandy Good entertained more visitors from the press. I don't want Squeaky gone, she told the reporters. I love her. She's beautiful. She's giving. All she ever does is give. She does the job none of you have the nerve to do. I don't think she had ever planned to do Ford. Sandy speculated. She just happened to be available. Then under her breath, she added, fool. As always, Sandy vigilantly guarded Lynn's reputation. The newspaper who says she's a drug user, she warned, you better clean that up. Downstairs, the elderly landladies who vouched for Lynn's character and Sandy's too, they reacted like part of the family, almost Jessie Fain, told the reporter. Then, for declaration, she added, our family, I mean? Michael Davies, like Ray Davies, had grown less enthusiastic about his dedicated neighbors. On Saturday morning, barely 24 hours after Lynn's arrest, he telephoned Leon Brown, an FBI agent he met outside 1725 P Street on the previous afternoon. I have something I think the FBI might be aware of, Davies told Brown. At the agent's invitation, Davies drove to the FBI offices on Cottage Way, where he showed Brown two of the pink envelopes franked by the Berkeley Seminary's postal permit. Brown, a 25-year FBI veteran, was intrigued. The two went to the parking lot where Davies fetched his car a pair of manila envelopes stuffed with the rest of the batch, about 170 pink envelopes altogether. Law enforcement had never much cared for Sandra Good. They would have been all too happy to file charges against her. Today, with Davies' testimony, the threat letter seemed a good basis for a prosecution. Unfortunately, while Davies remembers the iniquitous language used at P Street, he was uncertain which words had been spoken by Lynn, which by Sandy, or which by Heather. And this testimony could have been taken apart by a defense attorney. Davies volunteered to a better informant he would hang around Sandy long enough to report conclusively the unlawful things she was bound to say. Agent Brown later testified that he had tried to discourage Davies from getting mixed up with people who might be dangerous to him. But Davies was now determined to help put Sandy behind bars along with Lynn. The P Street women were a danger to society, Davies told Brown. Not only that, they made his friends uncomfortable. Brown soon concluded that Davies met the FBI standards for an informant. He asked Davies to keep silent about his visit to the FBI office, to continue his friendship with Sandra Good, and critically to keep a detailed diary of her activities over the coming weeks. Davies next saw Sandy and Heather on Sunday, September 7th, and acted as if everything was still fine. He told them he had taken the pink letters to Berkeley and had made it more difficult for the authorities to trace their origins, mailed them from several different locations around the city. Despite his new role as government informant, Davies had not given the FBI everything he had received from Sandy Good. He kept her mailing list in his apartment, figuring that sooner or later she'd be at his door demanding them back. Davies was right. Sandy did not want them back Sandy did want them back with a vengeance. Within days of Lynn's arrest, she dispatched Heather to receive the list, but Davies never seemed to be home when she knocked. The notes Heather left asking her for the list went unanswered. On one occasion, Davies' upstairs neighbor told him that she had heard somebody enter his apartment while he was away and running around. Davies never determined the intruder's identity. Finally, Heather managed to catch Davies early one morning. as he rushed out the door to school. I want the list, Sellers demanded. Davies told her he was in a hurry, but she insisted. Finally, Davies gave in. When the neighbors mentioned that visit from the friends of Squeaky Fromm disturbed them, Davies made a conduct his dealings with Sandy and Heather at their Peace Street apartment. This made his FBI duties easier, as the women were always at work on the business of the International People's Court of Justice, clipping articles, writing letters, updating their files. If Mike Davies came over, they put him to work too. We didn't have time for anybody unless they could be useful to us, Sandy later recalled. We didn't go out, we didn't party, we didn't take to a social life. We made it clear to Michael, if you come over, you work. The visit to P Street gave Davies a chance to further explore the writings of Lynn's friends. He would leaf through the envelopes laying out, taking particular interest in a cryptic dispatches from Charlie Manson. Sandy once snatched a Manson letter from Davies' hand. She eyed him carefully and asked if he was an informer. If I was, Davies replied, I wouldn't be here. Sandy found his answer acceptable. Morris Wilmarth, however, was not so quick as Mike Davies to grasp the implications of the Peace Street Women's Project. Although Davies began to confide in Wilmarth, his misgivings about Lynn and her friends, reading Helter Skelter had soured him on the Manson family. Davies said nothing of the contacts with the FBI. He felt to Sandy to explain to Wilmarth the meaning of the International People's Court of Retribution. Do you remember the Reign of Terror in France? She asked Wilmarth by way of introduction. She continued, whenever there is a chance, there often emerges an underground of sophisticated or not even sophisticated. She paused. I don't like the word sophisticated. Vanguard to lead the revolution. She says that is their sincerity. Their complete sincerity would enable these people to move without mistakes. In other words, their dedication is so strong that there would be no error in their movements. They don't get caught, she explained. The vanguard was the International People's Court of Retribution. She says there are people on the earth that are concerned that do have some soul outside the money-minded programming, that they have been sufficiently brainwashed. They still have some love for our earth and some concern. These people are intelligent enough not to be caught blowing up a stupid car or something like that, Sandy told Wilmarth. In other words, when they move to kill, and they do not make a mistake. According to Wilmarth's testimony, Sandy and the International People's Court of Retribution had 1,000 members, everyone an assassins dedicated to kill corporate leaders. But this information had hardly top secret. Sandy had been giving press interviews where she identified by the dozens of executives from such firms as MCA, DuPont, and General Electric, who had been marked for death. When the Associated Press correspondent stopped by P Street, Sandy gave her list of 79 executives condemned by the International Court of People's Court of Retribution. By now an expert in dealing with the news media, she had given appeared under notable and questionable on the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Sandy made sure to play the local interest. When a New Orleans radio station telephoned her for an interview, Sandy focused on victims who lived within the station's broadcast range, 6 men from Louisiana and East Texas, including an oil man, a candy manufacturer, and a president of a utility company. They would be terribly, terribly murdered, Sandy warned, but the executives themselves were killed. She added their wives would be hacked to death. The Detroit Free Press reporters James Suchze, Schutze, Suchze. Sandy played a media critic, apparently confusing Suchze's paper with the Los Angeles Free Press, a one-time underground weekly that had developed into a sex sheet. Sandy asked if the Detroit Daily was like Screw Magazine or the one of those porno papers. Suchze insisted that the Detroit Free Press was on the up and up. All right, Sandy continued, not wholly persuaded. You can clean that paper up. I've just been told that it's something of a rag that you put on those ads for whippings and, all that distorted sex. Then she went on to threaten Michigan corporate executives, including the president of Ford Motor Company, Lee Iacocca. She continued to nurse misgivings about the kind of paper that the Detroit Free Press truly was. Months later, when Suchi testified in Sandy's conspiracy trial, she cross-examined him about it. You don't have any ads like the Berkeley Barb, which has an insert where it has ads for a lonely man, 50, wants a gay guy and a woman too. Other correspondents received Sandy's counsel on how to conduct their personal lives. As a news conference, she called on the P Street apartment. Sandy lectured the assembled reporters about the coming wave of assassinations across the golf courses and bridge clubs throughout the country. And people in the news media, you better stop lying or you're going to get cut up too. Your blood is going to be on the walls. Suddenly, she thrust a wooden crucifix into the face of a young Newsweek correspondent, Mary Alice Kellogg. You, in your eyeshadow and dyed hair, trying to get your sensational story. Look at this, holding the crucifix closer, Sandy continued. This is you, woman. The room was still. Sandy smiled. You know you're sincere, Sandy said warmly. We all put Charlie on the cross. When Kellogg later covered Lynn's arraignment, the Sacramento Bee reported her face was free of makeup, her blonde hair modestly concealed under a plain headscarf. While behaviors like this, many wondered why Sandy was not herself arrested. Prosecutors suggested the problem lay in distinguishing between whether Sandy was threatening people on her own behalf, a criminal act, or merely reporting a threat made by an unrelated third party, which itself would not necessarily be a crime. Pressed by further explanation, Dwayne Keyes demurred. I do not want to indicate that the problem is because she reads too, the federal prosecutor said. And that's the end of this chapter. We'll leave it till tomorrow about the defense team. And if you think there's any like and truth in what I'm saying here, and you know damn well that this relates to the modern day world. So have a nice day and like and subscribe if you care about our Constitution.